So I am Tracy Longbottom, Head of Sales here at forstye. I have about 2 decades experience in sales, predominantly selling to law firms for my sins or otherwise. I do like to think that gives me really good insight into some of the problems that they have. So I've sold case and practice management systems, outsourcing, digital dictation, and Jane and I met at an AML onboarding provider in a previous role. So I do have quite a lot of diversity in selling different software solutions to the market over, hate to say it, but almost a couple of decades.
I love you telling people who you are, because I always think you massively undersell that. So I'm Jane, and I am product, but I'm also a lawyer. And I practiced law for 20 years, ran different law firms, had my own boutique small law firm. My background is in legal aid. So I, from the age of 8, was wanting to change the world, and I started in criminal defence in the East End of London, and that led me to know that it doesn't matter how many times you get someone bail, it matters like where they live and like their right to home and life. So I very quickly changed my career, and I, by the age of about 26, I was a partner in a law firm, and then I decided like that lawyers, like the card they'd been dealt was the wrong one, and that the technology was holding them back.
Yeah.
So I flipped and became a product leader. And that's where I met Tracy. I've worked in lots of big product organizations in legal tech. But where Tracy and I met, and some of the magic that we created together, was because we really were looking to solve the problem of risk assessments and risk, and how a law firm considers and practices risk. And there wasn't any technology, new or legacy, that could do that. And I met this superstar, Tracy.
No.
And what Tracy did is, she says sales, but sales can be like a really dirty word. But what Tracy did is consult with firms. I think she said sometimes it would be, she'd be working with a firm maybe over a period of like 8 or 10 years, where she was really looking at the problems they were looking to solve. And then when we came together and the magic happened, we were able to look at that and say, what does the law firm need? And we developed a roadmap, and we were able to deal with just that particular problem with risk and AML.
Yeah, and it's a really opportune time for risk assessments. I always say that selling reg tech is like 2 sides of the same coin, specifically for law firms, because they have to be doing something. And often it's a robust process, but often it's a very broken process. So it's highly manual, very little automation. There's data flying around everywhere. We often use the words Frankenstein tech stack. And we shared this really clear vision around wanting to automate that specific problem. Obviously, with the FCA taking over some of the AML regs, it's even more of a hot topic than it perhaps was even a few months ago. So
I think it's even just the approach to it. When you are looking at legal tech or reg tech, there is like this old legacy way that you would buy or choose or select your software. And those providers in the market are coming at it from what they sell and a particular problem, but they're not looking at right from day one, from the evolution of their business, what a law firm needs as that full tech stack and where they belong in that. So for us, it's so different. Our passion and our drive and our vision was transforming all of this fragmented risk data into actionable intelligence. So it's not about a form. It's not about a workflow. It's not about one little tick box exercise. It's about thinking about the whole of the law firm's technology, what they're going to need in 5 years' time, and how we bring that together for us in the market when we're looking at risk across that practice. You know, that is so crucial and so different. Don't you think about like our approach to this?
I think some of the major design principles that we had have really stood us in good stead from the outset. Law firms are very slow to change technologies. They're very reluctant to manage change a lot of the time, and for good reason. You know, they're fee earners. The reg tech part and the AML burden on them is huge. So the fact that we said leave whatever you have, wherever you have it, has really resonated with law firms. It's like, how do we eat an elephant? Like one piece at a time, because it's such a big thing for them, especially if they're going through other transitions in practice management or case management software. I think one of the other things that we did quite early on was designing a tool that was accessible by the whole market on our commercial model. And it was a very risky thing for us to do, but it's proven to work for sole practitioners right up to Magic Circle firms. So I'm not a big fan of saying any software is applicable for the whole of the market, but this regulation is the same regardless whether you are a one-user practice or as I said, a magic circle firm, and our software is accessible to everyone in that.
But the only reason that is because when you're building software to begin with, you're looking at who your target market is and who you're servicing. And very often that's because people have a pricing and a model that is aimed at big law or aimed at small. And really, it shouldn't be done that way. It should 100%. Be you have a tool that's accessible. Like you say, everybody in the market needs to do this, whether you've got a team of 60 analysts in your compliance team, or you are the person who is the MLRO, the CoLP, and you wear all those hats. You might also be the head of conveyancing and wear all those hats. So whoever that is, you've got the same problem to solve.
Yeah.
And software should be beautifully made to solve that problem and scalable for that problem. I think also like the idea that there's so much, again, like deconstruction of what's going to happen over the next 5 years with tech, because we now have AI, we have different ways that we can work. If you start as a law firm with a blank piece of paper and decided what you actually wanted, what problem you wanted to solve, and what software you could have to do that, you wouldn't choose what you chose like 5 years ago.
100%.
You probably wouldn't choose what you chose last year if you gave yourself the discipline to do that. And we can do that, right?
100%.
We can say like we're not going to put up with the old technology. We can build on an entirely new tech stack.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most exciting things is the rate of change just in software and software development generally. And we're doing that without disrupting what they currently have, which is music to most law firms' ears, because that whole process of change management is huge for law firms and it's really problematic in a lot of circumstances. So the fact that we can slot in exactly where they need us to and above all of their other things is like really appealing to the people that we're speaking to.
So that's because we're transforming data, right?
Exactly.
So your data might come from 3 different providers. Like, have 3 different providers for that data.
Yeah.
Don't dictate whose data it is. You're not having to displace someone else. Change can be like, law firms can adopt. Law firms are just humans, right? Law firms have teams who are all humans. And people always think, oh, lawyers are rubbish at change. I was a lawyer. I led national teams. Lawyers are not rubbish at change. Lawyers are analysts and they want things to be right. So they ought to be able to have a choice in that. And very often it's like a black and white, it's a binary choice. And neither of those options is quite right. So no matter what they do, they're compromising.
Yeah.
So to have something that means they don't just have to compromise or displace a way of working entirely, I think is important.
I think when we talk about change management in law firms as well, it's because the software doesn't quite meet their requirement. So it's because they don't really understand. And you talk a lot about human first. Like, regardless of the fact that we are underpinned wholly by AI, we are a human-first software business. And I like to think we really understand the problems that they're facing and how we solve them. So that change management piece then is much lighter because we understand exactly the challenges that they're facing and hopefully meet them where they are with foresight.
Well, I think it's important because that's all about how you design the software. So there was obviously not 2 or 3 camps, lots of different camps about how AI will be used and how the importance of the governance of that. So for us, starting with the governance and saying what we will do and definitely what we won't do and how we'll take people on that journey with us and design it as a human-centric tool is really important, because what also means we're not going into a compliance team and saying, by the way, guys, your job in 2 years won't happen or 3 years won't happen. What we're just saying is our software will not be determinative. We're not going to tell you as an analyst what you should do. We are going to support you to do your job, enhance your job. Anyone that uses our software, their experience should be a better experience.
Yeah.
And their job should be a more fulfilling job. And that might sound trite, but that is really actually important. And when people see that and when people feel that, then software empowers them. As 100%. Opposed to, can you tick my boxes and help me solve a problem, which you're going to have to compromise.
100%. Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons people have really been quite warm to the idea of new software in terms of foresight, because it's not about replacing people. It's not about saying you can have like technology instead of people. We absolutely understand the value of the compliance person within a law firm and the value that they can bring. But actually, having to analyse data manually from 15 different places is not a joy for anyone. Yeah. And if there's ways that you can speed that up, then all the better. I think that's why the change management piece hasn't been as challenging for us as it perhaps has been for some other technology providers.
But I also hear like a lot of consultants in the market and people saying like, you can't adopt AI, you can't do this until you sort your data out. And you've got large laws spending a lot of money on data lakes and saying like, we have to sort our data out. And by the time they've done that, I was at a big conference recently, and I stood up in front of a room full of like CTO of government, everyone's there. And I'm like, guys, by the time you sorted your data out, you will no longer have jobs. Like sorting your data out first without sorting the problem that you're trying to solve is what it is. So like, yes, of course, data is important, but software that can solve that problem for you and with you is also actually much more important. For us, what we're doing when we're harvesting that data, I know you don't like me saying harvesting.
I hate it.
But it is, we are harvesting data from lots of different places. And when we've got that data, we can put it to lots of different uses. And then we're learning more from what we're doing with the risk assessments with that data, which means that law firms don't have to say, can you do this report? Everybody loves Power BI and those tools, but they have to put good in to get good out. Whereas for us, when we have that data, we can say, let us tell you something about your firm you didn't know. Just flip that on its head, as opposed to, by the way, I'm used to running a report every day, and then I have to ask it and I have to design this report.
And it's lengthy and it's expensive. And by the time you've done that, there's probably new tech that is going to replace it or displace it.
And like people saying, data, new gold, whatever. For us, like if we have your data, you can have your data. Do you want to learn from your data? We want to learn from your data. But that shouldn't mean that we are like putting that behind closed doors, or that that's something special that you have to have the privilege to have.
Yeah.
LLMs, foundation models, these should be table stakes. You shouldn't have something in your app that says, hey, by the way, we're using a bit of AI over here. It's your right to be able to have that. And if we can provide that for law firms at the same time as solving their data problems, and then enable them to see what they couldn't see before, like the foresight.
You went there.
Have that foresight, I've gone there, but have the foresight so that they are looking at things from a proactive rather than a reactive stance. Like, it's just like flipping the whole way of practicing law on its head, right?
I think what we have done is we've taken AI and given it a very real life specific real world application. We made a decision quite early on not to say we're an AI risk platform, because to me, it's almost table stakes. If you're bringing new software to market now, then of course it should be underpinned by AI. And it's almost negligible, I think, for a law firm. If you can apply the right tool set to the right problem, then of course you should be using the latest technologies, which is what we aim to do. But if there's other things that are more appropriate than AI, or we can give a specific application to it, then I don't actually think law firms have been that nervous of it. They've been very welcoming, as long as they understand that the guardrails are there, that their data's secure, that we're processing it appropriately, and we have all of the right AI policies, which we've done very quickly, in my view. Law firms are actually quite happy to adopt that. And to your point, change is hard in a law firm, but it's not impossible. It's not insurmountable.
Well, it's about throwing software at anyone, whether you're an accountant, a lawyer, a teacher, whoever you are. Throwing software at someone and expecting them to pick it up is not the answer. You want to have software that people come to, that people say, that will make a difference.
100%.
And that may sound like really obvious, but it's not the way that software has been developed and distributed for the last 25 years, specifically in legal tech. So the way this software works is it should be something that people want to pick up and want to work with. The governance thing on AI, like we can help with that. Like for me as a lawyer, I am an analyst at heart, and the governance behind what we do is so crucial. And making sure that the user in the law firm, who may not be a lawyer, by the way, we've got sites, all the different ways that people practice law. People who are operating with our software and using our software should understand where they are in that software journey, what they provide to that, and what we give them back, and meeting that part in the middle, that human-centric part. So our governance, you should be able to pick up our governance policy and use it in your law firm, because it works for how you would practice with AI, not just our software.
Exactly that. Yeah, exactly that. And people haven't been reluctant. Like, I know there is AI fatigue. We talk about AI fatigue all the time, but I think it's because AI isn't the answer to absolutely everything, but it is the answer to some things. It means that we've been able to rapidly develop tech. It means that we've been rapidly able to amend the tech. And like you said, or one of us said, meet the client where they are. Because to your point around being human-centric, and we talk about this a lot in sales engagements, is we are effectively like a little coach on their shoulder. We are speaking their language.
We always say it's Kaylee's scale on your shoulder.
It's on your shoulder telling you what your policy says and guiding you through the whole thing. But that's the point, right? That it should feel human, and it should speak in their language, and it should be easily accessible. I think it has to be solving a direct problem, which we have a very specific goal in that, and we're staying in our lane. We do firm-wide client and matter risk assessments. Of course, that will grow, and we have aspirations to do wider things around policy and governance, risk and compliance more generally. But we want to nail that problem.
So talking about Kaylee Smale, should we get the Smale show in? Come and join us, Kaylee. I think for me, what was really important about involving you in our project was we had quite a clear vision and mission right at the beginning, but taking on change for compliance when people are very, very clear about what every tick box means can be quite a challenge. So you were instrumental really for me as a product leader to bring you in with Tracy and say, if we do this, Kaylee, will it work? Will people follow the risk? And you have been such a strong advocate of change in compliance. So why do you think that can work?
Just to say, like, any excuse to work with you too as well. I mean, even if I thought, maybe not, yeah, okay.
Did you think that, though?
No. I did not think that. I think that, obviously we all work together in legal tech, and there was a reason why I moved into legal tech from consulting. And so there isn't anything out there that really helps law firms. So when you came to me with this idea, I was like, that is amazing. And I think law firms are starting to realise that they need technology now to, get to where they need to be. And I think it's not just about, the risks. I also think sometimes they need to think about staff retention. We've got all these young lawyers coming in, and they come in and they've got a computer in front of them that looks like Windows 90. And they're like, what even is this? But I think when you told me that we're going to make risk assessments meaningful, I was like, yes, please. I want a bit of that. And I think what has been built definitely does that.
And to me, Tracy was really clear, again, going back to we harvest data. But when we're harvesting data, it's very easy just to focus on anything that is anti-money laundering and think that anti-money laundering starts here in a transaction and finishes here. And then you've got all this matter and client relationship and firm risk. So for me, like the matter side as well, in regards to how that works, was really important. But I know we talk about file reviews a lot and routine risk actions and what a risk client and matter, there's the matter in there, client and matter risk assessment should actually do. How do you feel about the matter side of it?
Yeah, I think again, it just becomes that tick box exercise, or they have like two separate forms. So they've got AML and then they've got what I would always call the regulatory side of things. So the things like, is the client vulnerable? Do you think that you have the expertise to be able to take this work on? Does it go over our insurance limits in terms of how much it is? So I think there's all these things that actually are all done in isolation. And I think it's quite similar with the AML risk as well. It's all done in isolation and it's never brought together to actually provide a meaningful response, because there could be something about the vulnerability that brings into the AML piece. They're vulnerable actually is a criminal using them to try and launder money through the firm. And so they are really important questions to ask, and it really does help you assess the risk. But, when they're in isolation, really
I think we talk about this a lot. Over the last 10 years, regulation in law firms has increased, and there's some brilliant tech out there, but it's like a point solution. It's like a sticking plaster on that specific thing. Identity being a good example, probably source of funds being another. Fantastic tech out there in the market, but it's solving one piece of the puzzle. And suddenly, as a compliance analyst, you've got 15 different places to look, and that's really, really challenging for most people, because it's hard to understand what that data means, specifically in line with a firm-wide risk assessment. You mentioned there things like your PII limit. Most people filling in a paper form would have no clue. If I was a conveyancer and my limit was £1 million, I'd probably think, I have no idea, 2 million, amazing, we're going to get some great fees on this work, and not understand the implications of it. And that's really what we're trying to do here, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that one also links into your transactions as well. Is this, one of the things that you have to look out for is it excessively large? And actually people don't actually know what their limits are for each department. They just don't know. And I think, and even when I say it to them, it's like this light bulb moment. They're like, oh, actually, we probably should work that out. Before. Yeah, we probably should think about that, and it's the things like, jurisdictions as well. How would anyone inside of compliance, if they're not opening the matters, know that there are jurisdictions that are filtering in that actually they're not happy with?
Well, because also people see it binary, don't they? Again, I keep saying this, but it's always like, is it FATF? Is it CPI challenging or not? So, you know,
and again, even for jurisdiction, like we're looking at 4 databases for this, and none of it's amalgamated. Then we're cross-checking against an Excel spreadsheet.
But it's not
really
about
manual.
It's not about like high risk or no risk. And so, like we say, Tracy and I was saying to law firms, so do you have any clients outside the UK? No, high risk. I'm like, okay, so do you act for anyone in Spain, Portugal? Oh yeah, we have clients outside the UK. We do actually have clients outside the UK. I'm like, okay, and can everybody deal with those cases? Does everyone have the specialism? And it's just like, because people have got used to saying, is it a PEP or not a PEP?
Yeah.
You know how we all the time now we're thinking, well, is it domestic or non-domestic? And we were saying, does everybody understand the difference between that? And the software helps you understand and helps you flag and helps you understand the discrete differences about how you would consider that. Then that is bringing the regulation into the software to help the lawyer change what they do. Like, I think one of the things that you taught me was by using our software, people are constantly learning.
Yeah.
And you're saying, Jane, could you just make sure that when you're coaching someone through that part, if they want to, you can explain to them what that part of the process means.
Yeah. And that's important.
Yeah,
isn't it?
it's so
like
important. Yeah, I think the confidence of the fee earners or confidence of the analyst to actually really understand the why behind why they're being asked these questions. Because at the moment there isn't any of that. I went into a law firm and it had a question that says, "Is there a proliferation financing risk?" And I was like, "Do your staff know what proliferation financing is?" And they were like, no, we just had to put it in there because obviously the regulations changed and we had to put it in there. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure no one knows what that means. So it's things like that as well. So, you know, with foresight, to have that explanation, you would understand that more. And then also, I think for the fee earners themselves, they are thinking more about risks. At the moment, it's a tick box exercise that they normally just do at the start, and then it's like put to one side and then not thought about again. Whereas because they don't understand the why they're being asked these questions, because no one's told them, or they might have had a bit of training back in 2017 when matter risk assessments became a thing, and now they've got the same form that they've been ticking boxes. They actually know which ones to do now. You know, like, oh, I tick yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, because they've never had that real training as well.
Yeah, I think it feeds really nicely into the sort of work that you do and other compliance consultants in the industry as well, because it really highlights quite quickly where there are training gaps. Like, they might not understand that what proliferation financing is or what a high-risk jurisdiction means for that type of work that they're doing. And yes, we will coach them so far, but we're really passionate around working together with the compliance community as well. And obviously you've been massive for our business, but massively still advocates of what you're doing aside from that, in just levelling up law firms to being better, understanding what that data means, understanding if there is a training gap to bring somebody wonderful like yourself in. And I think, I know it's a bit cheesy, but like together we are genuinely stronger.
I think having the software so that when you're thinking, one of the feedback we got from a lawyer who I'm always very grateful for, is said that everything in compliance is either escalated or it's just done.
Yes. Yeah.
And no one wants to say like, hello, could I ask a question on this? Yeah. So one of the things that was really fundamental about we have this commentary that runs all the way through. So you can talk to anyone about what you're doing as you're doing it. It's not black mark. You're not going to be told off for doing that. You're actually going to be able to have that full transcript. Obviously, we know what's being asked, so we can help and we can say, guys, these are the things that potentially you might want to change. But also, it just means that you're going to have a better decision because it's a collaborative exercise. So you could Kaylee Smell from within our app, or at Tracy as your supervisor to say, I don't want to escalate it, I just want to ask a question. And then you're not blocked and you're not hiding under help me, I think I should know the answer to this, but I don't want to collaborate.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. There is only so far technology can go. And we, as ambitious as we are in the technology, we're also very cognizant of the fact that we will never replace compliance consultants, and nor should we aim to, because they're the ones with the inherent knowledge and value as to how you should deal with particularly tricky problems. If you've got a particularly tricky source of funds or source of wealth, technology can't help you with that. Only somebody with expertise like yourself can do that. And I think collaboration is massive throughout Foresight. And I know the whole of the industry talks about it, and I'm almost reluctant to even say the word, but the platform has been designed to make people like your lives easier as well, because you know, a lot of compliance consultants work on a retainer basis, and if they have to go in and look at, again, 15 sources to get the context of an issue, that's, it's quite tricky, quite difficult to make that like profitable for themselves as well.
Yeah. And I've been helping a law firm recently. I've taken on a new client, and that's exactly, so they're like, we've got this piece of CDD. There could be a sanctions, there could be a PEP issue, and I'm just bombarded with loads of different emails and loads of I pulled off from, say, this tech company, and then I also went and did a manual search, and I'm just like overwhelmed with so much information, and then it takes me so much more time. So it's the efficiency as well, I think, and I think that's why consultants will want to sign up with Forstye. They want to partner with Forstye. So consultants like me, because you're going to be able to help the client quicker and in a more efficient way, which means we can help more people as well. That's the point, and I think like the audit function as well, being able to, it's really important. It's so important. And the SRA really did hone in on it at the conference, and they were saying you need to be monitoring compliance, and the way that you need to be doing this is potentially through file reviews. Like, we might not even need to have to do that with Forstye.
The work that you do, I remember you sharing like some of your firm-wide risk assessment reviews, and when you go in, it can take a long time. We're not even just talking about weeks. So if you could do that instantly at any time, knowing that you're running all those risk assessments and we're collating that and giving you that firm-wide view of your risk, that is that is connecting and again, we talk about Frankenstein tech stack, but we also solve for saying what you do and doing what you say. And if those two things are disconnected, so if we're putting your policy, if we're digitizing your policy, and then you're able to actually like run that firm-wide risk assessment, and everything you're doing in the platform is informing your firm-wide risk assessment. You don't have to wait 12 months to review that. You can just say, did you know that although we say that conveyancing is our highest risk, there's only this team that deal with these really high-risk elements, and the reason that they do that is because their clients come from this jurisdiction, or because those properties are actually just in an area of London or an area of like Alderley Edge, which is like really expensive, and they're not actually more complex. And so the risk of those, just because there might be transactions over 5 million, they're actually really straightforward transactions. And the people who are buying them are easy to understand who they are, but it's some of those ones that are kind of in that middle area that we're actually flagging as higher risk, and that's where you should be looking.
That oversight, have a look at those. That oversight is really difficult to have, and having worked on so many firm-wide risk assessments recently, it can take, for a bigger firm, it can take up to 6 to 9 months. You have to get, the fee earners involved, and then you're trying to pull data, started on trying to pull data from case management systems. So I think you're involved in finance, you're involved in IT. There's so many different people, and then I had to grab all of that information and collate it. Some of the questions they don't quite understand and don't know what I'm asking for. Because fee earners aren't used to looking at those sorts of things. Or it could be that the system has showed me that, they only act in certain jurisdictions, but the fee earners are telling me, oh no, we actually act in these as well.
And they have no idea, do they? That's the thing,
they have no idea that that's happening. And until you go out and you do that, but it is so time consuming. We were talking to someone, weren't we, the other day, and she was saying that she does interviews with the fee earners.
And this is like thousands of fee earners, huge
massive firm. And she's, I did say to her, I want to see your risk assessment because I think it sounds amazing. But the work that has gone into it, and she said, I can't do that every year. It's just not. It's just not plausible.
But also, even if you there's so much amalgamation in the market, and law firms want to become with economies of scale. They want to be the best they can possibly be, and sometimes that means merging with the law firms. So every time that happens, that means whose process. How do you know where is your starting point? So if you've got technology that is across that, for you, that's a massive benefit, isn't it?
It would be so easy, wouldn't it?
I think it just has such a wider impact than this. So one of the biggest overheads in law firms right now is professional indemnity. It's actually forcing a lot of law firms out of the market. And if we can surface that data and we can preempt it, I think that's one of the major differences of Forstye, is that we're not just recording risk, we're preempting that risk and telling them the mitigating factors, whether that's training or whether that's something that they need to do in terms of their insurance. We stop that before it's an issue. We're not just recording it after the fact.
So we're being proactive rather than reactive. And I think a lot of everything that happens to do with risk is very... it's very reactive.
Even SARS, like, oh no!
It's very reactive, isn't it? But I think, and a policy won't change until something goes wrong. And then they're like, oh, that went wrong, so we need to change policy now, deathbed wills and things like that. Something went wrong, so now we need to make sure that we've got a process for that.
Also, and I think that's really important. I think it's just that process of saying, like, we can give you back some of the agency that you've taken away from people as well.
100%.
Because how many firms say, everything's enhanced, if it's in that bit, it's enhanced due diligence.
Because they're so scared to deviate.
This is not a
away
high
from
risk
that.
matter.
Yes.
But did you know that that client with this matter is not high risk? So I think the other thing that's empowering is giving people a holistic view of risk, which means that if Jane Pritchard, I mean, I may only be like 2 years PQE, and I am doing the assessment because I really want to understand the matter, but like the type of transaction that is, I have the agency to be able to go and make that decision without everything going up the tree.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because yes, property is like, you know, the highest risk when you're dealing with like what's coming out of there from SARS and investigations and everything else. But that doesn't mean that there are property transactions that are vanilla.
And all day, every day. Yeah. Agree.
So I think,
I also think as well, you know, your point about, you know, everything's enhanced, but actually is everyone following that process?
Yeah.
So actually like people on the ground are like, well, I don't think it's enhanced, I think it's medium, so I'm going to do X, Y and Z.
I know which box to tick to get through this.
Exactly, yeah. I'll just tick, yes, okay, I've done this, but actually are people following those? And I think that was one of the things that the SRA picked up was that actually people weren't following enhanced due diligence when it was being marked as high risk.
But that worried me a bit because I was thinking, you know, when we're coaching people through that, and I'm now obsessed with laundering money because all my examples that I run through the software. Because I'm trying to do it through the software. I'm looking at all of the examples. You know, you've got to know how to do it. I'm literally running and finding things out about properties ourselves when we're developing the software. And we're like, I think there might be money laundering there because we're connecting into land registry, into company's house. So some of the data that we're providing to enhance the risk, that knowledge that they have, I think is really interesting. And then you're like, actually, I know more. But I was worried, Kaylee, wasn't I? Because I was like, you know, but we're going to ask them to do more. It's proportionality in how you do your enhanced due diligence, right? Different levels, simplified, standard. And I'm saying, but you know, I'm going to ask them for this. And you were really reassuring, go, that is what enhanced is, Jane.
Yeah, like, that is what they should be. That's what they should be doing. And I always say it. So I've gone into firms before we had like lovely technology like Foresight, and I've had to create risk assessments for firms. And I've had people like, you know, we've had a little bit of moan that, you know, we've got to do more now. And I was like, yeah, but you should have been doing that already. I'm not giving you something.
You're not giving you more than you should be doing.
I'm not giving you more than you should be doing. Actually, this is the bare minimum that you should be doing, and you just weren't doing it. You were just ticking a box to say, I've done CDD. And that was our risk assessment.
It's not about doing it quick.
No.
And a lot of technology comes at it like, we will save you 4 hours on your process. And I'm like, look, what you do with us will collect the data and prevent you from having to look at everything potentially in the same way. But we're not there to save time. Like, it's not a time-saving exercise. It's not wholly about time. You will be efficient. You will be efficient. You will be efficient. You'll be definitely more efficient at it. But if you're only going to save time, you'll cut corners. You'll go the path of the quickest time. And for us, it's about efficiency, but also the effectiveness of that risk assessment.
I know I keep saying it, but like meaningful.
Yeah.
You want to have a meaningful risk assessment.
To Jane's point, when we've been testing, when we've been using real life examples, this is risk that firms don't even inherently know exists. Like we are definitely raising the bar in terms of what they know about their clients and what they know about their matters. And if that is really difficult to establish in 3 or 4 or 5 different data points, then we're really raising that and we're really making it, to your point, a meaningful process for them to say, actually, the reason that we're doing this is to stop money laundering, is to find high-risk matters and potentially not want to proceed with them. I think one of the things the SRA said was that there weren't enough aborted matters for these reasons. And we are clearly making that very easy in the app to say we don't want to represent this client because it falls outside our risk appetite. Or we are a little bit worried about the data that we've found. But it's very difficult for a law firm who is targeted on fee income to make that decision unless it's presented to them in a way that, as you said, is meaningful and they can clearly see that that's a higher risk to them as a firm and their own practicing certificates ultimately.
Well, I think they forget that though. 100%. They think it's the MLRO and I'm like, no, it's actually that can get into trouble. But I think the point on data as well is really important because we can show then, because law firms are not very good at marking down those matters that they don't let through the door. So they don't have that data, whereas, and then, you know, like the National Crime Agency and the SRA will moan in saying that, you know, you don't have enough reports. Well, actually, we don't have that many because we're stopping it at the door.
We're stopping it, but we need to evidence it.
But we need to evidence it, and that's what Foresight can help with as well.
Why do you want to act as well? When you are acting, why do you want to ask? How can you manage the risk? What is it about that? We have this, like, we have one of our coaching journeys, well, most of our coaching journeys give you the ability to opt out, but they also say is there anything, we call it spidey sensors, but like, you know, when I was practicing law, you know, regardless of whether you're at the beginning of that instruction or you pick it up, spidey sensors come into this all the time, and you're like, there's something not quite right. When do I put my finger on it?
Based on experience that technology just cannot have a provision for, isn't it?
Exactly, but being prompted for that and saying, just before we do this, is there anything else? Because this is not a tick box exercise. And while we're following the risk and we can't see a risk here, and we've looked at your pets and we've got to, is there anything else that's just like in your brain that you're thinking isn't quite right? Whether you were the first person who took the call, whether they came to you through the website, whether you give them a very beautiful experience because you're a boutique firm, whatever that is, if you are ticking boxes, that is lost. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So having that, you know,
does it make sense? Just think one more time before you go ahead. Yeah. Before you go ahead with this, does this all make sense? And I think lots of lawyers forget that bit. You know,
it sounds like we're being sales prevention, fear and prevention here. We're absolutely not. We're not. I think the point is, though, the reason that people are so worried about risk assessments in general and are trying to do something, whether it's a manual process or it's in their case management system, is that because they really do genuinely care. We don't come across any firms that want to launder money, that want to enable criminal activity and be the vehicle for that. Genuinely, in the probably nearly 20 years I've been doing that, I haven't encountered a firm that's their intention. But the reason they don't sleep at night is because it's not an easy process for them. And where that really is our values, is how easy can we make this for you to make the right decision as well.
And then keep you safe.
Exactly.
Because I think that's something I always talk about. We want to keep you safe. And I, you know, before, when I've implemented risk assessments, even those horrible written ones that, you know, that people have to do, I've gone in and I've done training, and one of the lawyers actually said to me, she's like, I actually feel safe now. I was like, that's like all I want to hear. Like, it's a big change for them. They've gone from having nothing to this massive,
it's a big burden.
And that's not their job.
No, exactly.
That's not their job. They didn't come into this thinking, I'm going to have to spend, you know, 2 days doing, you know, a risk assessment and client due diligence. They're there to, you know, service a client.
Yeah. But like you said earlier, like, I think that we've had, firms had to move because of pandemic fast. And people, like remote clients, it used to be that a client who was remote was a risk to you because they were remote, and then everyone was remote. So
COVID put a stop to that.
So there was 5 years worth of like mad investment in technology that solved these point little solutions about remote, biometrics, cryptographic,
open banking,
NFC for pass. You know, how we understood more about the client, especially in a B2C or the directors of that business. How we knew more about that based on that. And actually, what happened is people lost the thread through the middle of it. Everything became, can I tell it's that person on that photo, without pulling that together and thinking like, how do I actually know what this client does? We were with law firms, and literally we've been doing, as we've been onboarding clients into our application, I'm like, okay, but you've got all the photos, and like, what does your client do? And they're like, what? Like, you know the occupation. Like, what's the occupation?
We have no idea.
So even like, I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's like you become obsessed with the technology of like the biometric result or someone's open banking results from their bank statement. But you're like, and what do they actually do? Where have you tracked that profile on that source of wealth thing?
Because
everything becomes a little bit of point data without actually looking at
without knowing those small things. And sometimes they have it on a form somewhere. They capture that data, but they're just not looking at it. And I think it's, I think you're right. Everyone did just hone in on that. You know, that ID and V, like the identification part, and they forgot about everything else. And I'm like, well, you know, criminals have a passport and they live somewhere.
I love it when you say that. I love it.
You know, like, you know, that's not going to help you. What is going to help you is that, you know, understanding what they do as a job, looking at their source of funds, their source of wealth, and bringing that picture in. And again, I'm going to be annoying and say, does it make sense? You know?
I had a really interesting conversation with someone at the event we were at this week, and talk about carrot and stick where risk assessments are concerned, because it is burdensome for a lot of fee earners. And I won't name her in case she doesn't want me to, but she was saying, like, she has to find a way to make this make sense to fee earners. So when they don't take this seriously, she would ask them things like, so would you be happy to represent a child sex offender? And suddenly that hits a little bit home. Would you be happy not to do a credit check on your client and not get paid at the end of this? And weirdly, some of those things resonate more than the practicing certificate. I think what's happened in this space is the regulator has been seen to maybe target unfairly, or maybe because it's an easier target, small to medium-sized firms. But it's about us understanding the things that really matter for those fee earners and really matter for that law firm, and having technology that allows that to be articulated in a way that makes sense to them as well.
But it's also those law firms are getting the double whammy of the small to medium firms generally are doing really high transaction. So, they are doing incredibly long days and long hours.
And high risk work.
And high risk work because it's property work.
Yeah.
And then they're expected to like understand all of it, practice all of it, and take the burden of that. Often in teams where they don't have, a lot of in-house analysts, so the fee earners, there's a lot to be said for fee earners doing risk assessments because they own the risk and they understand the risk. But in other firms that, in larger law firms, they might have their own team that does it for them. Yeah. So I just think, when I was practicing as a lawyer, I just felt I was always at so much of a disadvantage, and I was a litigator, but I still thought for what we do, any mistake we make, whether it's advice, whether it's compliance, our whole career is on the line all the time. Yeah. And it doesn't matter whether you're the one who goes to the Tower of London or not, or whether you're wearing that hat. Because lawyers care about it. What am I like?
They do care. That's what I mean.
I just want to be in the right. I want you to tell me that what I've done is right. We're all looking at probability, and as a lawyer, and we're like, should we take this case on for X? We want to be doing the right thing. Yeah. So it means something to us, like you said. So I think it's really important when you flip it and say, what does that actually mean? But I also want to say it isn't just about money laundering. Money laundering is really, really important, but it is also about law firm risk.
Yeah.
We want law firms.
Reputational risk.
Reputational risk. Are they going to be able to pay? People get like the judgments, counter court judgments, and they don't actually look at them separately because it's just hidden in their data. It's all of that side of it as well.
I think in a consolidated market as well, where there's so much merger and acquisition activity, law firms have got to really start considering that their processes are right. Because if I was an acquiring firm, that is the first thing I would be looking at. Am I buying or am I merging with a firm that has inherent risk, or they don't understand where their risk lies? And actually, that's where you can flip compliance on its head and say, this is a real advantage to us because we are really, really hot on this, and we've got really robust processes. We're super slick. We are time saving with the appropriate technology, but we're also ensuring that we are totally compliant, because we don't want those skeletons falling out of the closet just before a merger or just before we're acquiring another firm.
I mean, can you imagine if your compliance team and your compliance business became a competitive advantage in your law firm, like that you weren't scared to go to compliance, but compliance were like this shining example of how every firm should practice, and that wouldn't matter whether you were small, medium or large. Can you imagine if people...
And we are working with firms that are saying compliance is a massive advantage for us. We are making ourselves... We're putting our head above the parapet and saying, like, this is making us attractive to other law firms, because people aren't worried. People aren't scared that they're being asked to do things that are non-compliant, or worried that there's not good or easy processes for them to be so.
To report suspicious activity, to be able to do that without having to, be seen as causing
whistleblowing
causing a challenge for the law firm. I always think like SARS and stuff is really, really difficult, because you are the one who's having to put your head above the parapet and say something, and it should be also that the software helps you say that. To say, look, this doesn't look right. You might not feel it's right quite yet, but we're also seeing some flags here.
And it's all about the evidence, right? Yeah. Like, it's easy to say I'm not doing this if you have the evidence in front of you. Yeah. Which is what we aim to do, right?
But I think also, just have to say this, no matter where you're practicing, and it's not about being perfect. I mean, I know, like I've just said, that I like to be right all the time. And I'm not right.
This is Jane Keller.
But this is because I'm a lawyer, and because like we have this thing where like, no, we have to be right. Like in 5 years' time, someone's going to say, "Were you right, Jane? Were you right when you did that thing?" Yeah. So we feel like, but it isn't. You also know it isn't about being right. It's about being proportionate, looking at the evidence. Yeah. And it's the Kaylee thing of, does it make sense in 5 years' time? Yeah. Or in 2 years' time, when the police knock on the door and say, did you know this was happening in your practice? Or when you've got a thematic review, or when you're being audited, it's not going to be at that time subjective. You just want to look into your application and say, made sense then, and it makes sense now. Yeah. Right? And then that's the bit about
being in a defensible position.
Yeah. It's giving themselves credit for the work that they're doing as well, because I think sometimes, some things aren't thought about because they've never been told to think about those risks. But at the same time, like you said, no one intentionally goes out there. I mean, there are some naughty solicitors, but they're few and far.
Oh, they're so few and far between.
Few and far between. I know it comes out in the news and everyone's like, solicitors, they're all bad. No, it's like one bad egg. But actually, I think, solicitors, they want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And that's really important as well.
So we have obviously some clients who specifically are offshore. So I'm thinking of clients who might have 9 offshore offices in different jurisdictions, where obviously the risk is incredibly high. What about that, like from a perspective of managing risk?
Yeah, well, we've seen this over the last few years, and specifically recently, where it is really difficult because you have to be proportionate in region. So let's take the US as an example. There's lots of US city firms that have cross-Atlantic works that they have, and it's really difficult to enforce that in the US because their AML regulation is very different. Almost non-existent, to be honest. Well, it is. It is.
And the Americans. So.
And that's really difficult. But if you can make it an easy process and you can articulate why it matters, then we've seen this with some offshore law firms that we've been working with recently. The appetite is there. I don't think even in the US they want to be laundering money. It's just that the process has to be easy for them. We were speaking to someone again at the event this week, and the biggest challenge comes from knowing that there's a slight nuance in an offshore jurisdiction that means that they can't quite operate in the way that they would in the UK, but we make that super easy for them.
I just think like wherever you are, whichever jurisdiction you're operating in, whether you're an organisation level, for us in the software, it's really important that you can think about what would you do as an organisation, what do you do as a firm, what do you do in those different branches? So, for example, Kaylee, where you have got 9 offshore sites, those processes for those sites are likely to be different in how you assess risk. But that feels naturally what the software should be able to do, right? That's the problem to solve.
Yeah, exactly. Because you can have your levels, can't you? All your different levels for all your different countries. Because even with European countries, they're still slightly different to the rules that we have. So I think, yes, being able to pull that all together. And again, you can, within the app, you'd be able to see, this office does this and this office does that. And you can pull it all together. Whereas that's really tricky to do. Because again, it's in that isolation, isn't it? That's for that. That's for that business. That's for that business. That's for that business.
Because Kaylee in Cayman Islands, right? Kaylee in the Cayman Islands she doesn't know you should just be able to operate as Kaylee in the Cayman Islands, not as Kaylee having to think about the fact she's in the Cayman Islands when she's doing that particular transaction or where that transaction is. And also, obviously we focus a lot on country of birth as well as country of residence, but also where the transaction's happening. So all of those 3 things together, I think for jurisdictional risk is like really important. And the nuance there is really, how many times again we've been saying, people just track country of residence. And then we're like, where was your client born? And then in the software, it's never mandatory normally. So that, I've been sitting with law firms recently on board, and I'm just going to go and look in the passport. Where were they born? And obviously there's that nuance of like, does that bring a different amount of risk when you're thinking about sanctions, or what that means in regards to what that is?
Sanctions regimes, obviously with the Russia-Ukraine war, pushed that massively up everyone's agenda, didn't it? But again, the regulation's changing like internationally, specifically on the AML front, and there's not one defining. We've got FATF, which should define how everyone should operate, but
every 6 months, people like shake the tree.
Exactly.
Like, that is way not enough, is it? If you have a little think about it. I mean, for us in the software, we're thinking about it all the time, but at the very minimum every 2 weeks, because we're thinking, how has things changed geographically? What does the risk look like geographically? And also, just because a country, recently South Africa, when anyone leaves FATF, it's like, what happens to them? Well, they've got like 1 point down, or they're working towards this with what they're doing. Does that mean they're still not high risk for that firm? Probably not. They probably still need to be high risk, and how do they manage that? And
they're actually like looked at. FATF don't just let them on their way. They're like for 18 months. They're still
off.
Exactly. We're okay to go. But I think just looking, and it's something again that I've been discussing with law firms, that actually just looking at say FATF just isn't enough, because you as a firm, you might have other jurisdictions that you think, no, we're not happy with that. So I think it's really important to have like your own list. And again, that's something that all can be incorporated
nominating
nominated list of countries that you're not happy with. But and all these firms have these lovely spreadsheets, but I'm telling you now, not one fee owner is going there every single time.
Doing a control find. What does Lebanon mean?
Exactly, to go and find that. Or they're being told, like, here's a link to, the Transparency International corruption perceptions index. There's not, you know, and then they're made to look at it and they're like, well,
what does that even mean? What's the context?
I mean, they're yellow. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Because
Can we take yellow?
I was with a law firm this week that I am like a total like CPI nerd now because I run so many tests through the software. I'm
Just joining you, Kit.
I know. I'm looking at like that CPI up and down all the time. And so again, if you look at it and thinking like, well, like a year ago, this was 20 points down. What does that mean to me? You know, it's not FATF, but what does that mean? But the other thing is lawyers and analysts, they really get that.
Yeah.
So when you give them the tool and you're like, you can see that at any time. And also when you're doing your assessment, it's giving you that score and that score is holistic. People like absorb that. I've absorbed that now, you know, in the frontal cortex bit is the CPI.
We should give her a
like
CPI
in the back
quiz.
of my retina. It's in the back of my retina, like all of those scores.
Do you know,
because I see it so much in the software.
So do you know how many times I've had to update documents with all of those risks?
Oh,
They change
really?
every year. It's like every
Interesting.
January the new list comes out and I'd be there like going through and like checking, has it changed? Is it the same?
This is your favourite thing though, isn't it?
I mean,
You've been sat poolside for us before, like with your children, waiting for the update.
FATF
And I'm
update.
like,
It's like,
and
I
it's
have a good
amazing
time.
for us. But
Popcorn, glass of something fizzy, FATF plenary going on. It's happy days. I just want to say it is challenging and it is rewarding, and very often working with you guys is also joyful because we are bringing this passion and drive to solving AML and compliance and risk to our software. But for those people who don't get to live in the bubble of solving it day in, day out through tech, what would you say, coming to you first, like Tracy, what would you say, what should they do? How can we help them?
So any law firm who thinks their processes in terms of firm-wide client or matter risk assessments or monitoring jurisdictions, I would really urge them to speak to us. Don't be scared of the change. We are not asking you to disrupt your whole tech stack. We're not asking you to make huge outlays in terms of a commercial investment. And we really are genuinely interested in helping people solve this problem in a really intuitive, easy to deploy way.
And we're not there to sell them software, they're there for them to liaise really on what their problem is. So they can just talk to us and we can, and Kaylee, like for you in that market from consultants, and maybe consultants will be in this space as well thinking, well, how would I embrace software? How could I do that? What would you say to them?
Again, come and speak to Foresight because actually...
We'll speak to you maybe. You're the intermediary in the market.
Okay, they can come and talk to me.
You're still SMAIL compliance as well, right?
Yes, I am.
You're still
yes.
right at the coalface.
Yes, I am. So you know, anyone that wants to come and have a chat, I'm kind of building a little army of consultants at the moment. You know, we're all working together, collaborating, because we all want to do the same thing, don't we? Yeah. We all want to help law firms and 100%. We all want to keep people safe. So,
well, thank you so much.
Oh,
it's been a pleasure being on the journey with you, but I definitely would not. I'd never do this without you guys.
You never thought.